What's going on, everyone? It's your guy, Cole Jackson, back with another episode of the Ravens Roundtable here on Two Guys Watching Football. I am joined by two of my good friends. We got Cap Guru Dan Reese at DP Reese 8 on Twitter. Dan, my guy, how's it going?
It's going, huh? It's a little quiet to start free agency, but what a day today.
What a day today, indeed. And we have James Ogden at NFL Ogden on Twitter, our friend from the UK Ravens, Russell Street Report, and RedStarBaltimore.com, your go to website for draft season. James, my man, how's it going? Late night over there for you.
No, yeah, not bad, Cole. It's not too late actually this time. You guys have gone on to daylight savings and we haven't yet, so
I didn't even
it's
think about that. There
a
you
little
go.
earlier.
There you go. Yeah, I was just telling Dan, it's 7:15 here for me, so I was battling getting my daughter to bed so that we could get in here as early as humanly possible for you. But thank you guys so much for joining me, and what a topic we have. I mean, Dan nailed it. It was a quiet day one. Fan base was in shambles. I thought the Molotov cocktails were going to come out, and then I don't think anyone saw this coming, and I think that's one of the key things. I mean, reports happen and whatnot, but no one saw this coming. Ironically, Dan and I were on a Spaces last night at like 1 a.m. my time. I couldn't sleep, so I'm on a Spaces with Vass and Mr. Yuri on Twitter, and we actually got talking about what could a Marcus Williams deal look like, and talking about getting aggressive with the cap. And then it comes out it's a 5-year, $70 million deal. So we're going to get into it. We're going to go through the cap situation, what a contract could look like. We do not know the full details. There were some reported details that we're going to look at with Adam Schefter's tweet, and then luckily enough, James has already kind of taken a look at the film a few weeks ago. I dove into 2 games today, so we'll get into a little bit of that. So we'll start here with Dan, and we kind of put this together just to walk through easily. So 5-year, $70 million deal. Schefter tweeted, "This deal includes $37 million guaranteed, including $31 million in next year per source." Dan, what the heck's that mean? I don't know what this is talking about.
Yeah, that's a great question. Adam Schefter sometimes has trouble tweeting clearly. 31 million in next year is really vague, but there are a couple of ways you can interpret that. My guess is that over the next calendar year, he's going to get $31 million. So we kind of structured it 2 different ways to look at it. The first one is kind of just straightforward if he gets the $31 million now, but the likely way that would be split is that you would get your base salary of $1 million, which is the minimum base salary, and then the other $30 million would be a signing bonus, and that would be spread over the 5 years. So that would be the prorated bonus of $6 million a year plus the base salary for a cap number of $7 million. So extremely low cap number for the first year, especially for a $14 million APY. In order to get the guarantees up to $37 million, probably maybe a $6 million guarantee for year 2, something like that. Pretty standard, kind of to have the second year be the remaining guarantee part. It's really kind of it's a great signing, whether it's this structure or a different one. We'll talk about a little bit of the reasonings cap wise in a minute, but this is definitely one option. When I kind of threw this out there, Brian McFarland, who's fantastic at cap stuff for the Ravens, said, I don't know that all 30 is actually going to be a signing bonus. Humphrey only got 20. Ronnie Stanley got 22.5, and the remaining piece was an option bonus at the beginning of the second year. So it's close to a calendar year. After is kind of rounding to the nearest calendar year, basically, maybe 13 months, and saying that he's going to get. So in this example, we got a signing bonus of $20 million, and then an option bonus of $10 million. You can't. And over the cap, you can't input an option bonus, but basically what it is it's kind of the same thing as a deferred signing bonus is for cap reasons. So what it would be is you've got the $20 million spread over all 5 years, and then you've got the $10 million spread over the second through fifth year, the remaining 4 years. So it actually would drop the cap down to $5 million in the first year, basically pushing more out into the future. The option bonus would be guaranteed. But as long as you're on the roster, blah blah blah. There's different ways to guarantee it, and it would still kind of count as a guarantee. So this is definitely another way that it could be restructured. Both of these rely on the fact that the base salary would be $1 million, which is about the minimum. The Ravens could always pay him more than that as a base salary, which would then mean less in the signing bonuses. Why they would do that, I don't really know. Maybe he wants that it structured that way, but really this would be kind of the way I would hope the Ravens would structure it in order to kind of spread the cap the most.
Right. And for those of you just joining us, we have Dan Reese and James Ogden here to break down the Marcus Williams signing. If you guys are enjoying this, hit the like button for me. Hit subscribe if you guys aren't already subscribed. So yeah, I mean, it's just funny because we were talking about this middle of the night last night, and then the deal comes out, and it's a 5-year deal, and so that's kind of what was exciting because we've been talking about. I mean, there's been but everyone's been talking so much about being more aggressive with the cap, more aggressive with structuring. And you kind of nailed it last night. Like adding this 5th year is one of the best ways to do that. And so to actually lay out the cap and what it can look like. And just again, for those of you at home just joining us, this is prediction. So we have 2 structures here. We don't know all of the details. We're working off a Adam Schefter tweet. At least he didn't have to rescind this one, so that's great. Good on you, Adam. Progress. But it's we have to work off what the information is. Devil's always in the details, but we can kind of glean a little bit and put some things together. And then this is we got the cornerback contracts here. So what do you want to take a look at here, Dan?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of see where this contract kind of ranks amongst the other large cornerback contracts, just to see how it stands. It's pretty amazing. This is actually a $14 million APY actually ranks tied 11th, which is remarkable for kind of one of the top free agent cornerbacks to get them so far down in the ranks. Normally, like every year, it just is the top ones, because of cap increases and things like that. But to have the APY be so low for a very good cornerback, this is cornerbacks. I should have gotten safeties. No wonder.
So no worries there because I already have the information. So it actually ranks 7th in free safeties. So same idea. That's all we wanted to show. So it ranks 7th in free safety contracts, which I think is pretty crazy because we talked about this the other night too. Because when you're a top 5 guy at your position and you hit the market, you usually reset the market, even if
right.
If someone else kind of comes up and they're not the number 1, they're the number 3, they're usually going to reset the market. So the fact that he ranked in 7th at current APY, that's pretty crazy. So it really shows that. And so, that's where there's maybe a little bit of trade-off, a little bit less APY for that extra year of term. It gives him an extra year of job security. Maybe he wants it structured in a certain way and kind of gave that up. But nonetheless, it's a fantastic contract for the Ravens to land a top guy, position of need, impact player. It's, a 26-year-old. He turns 26 this year. I think he's 25 right now. His birthday is before the season starts. So it's you're getting a guy on his 2nd contract, 3rd contract if you count that he's coming off the franchise tag. He was a 2nd-round pick out of the University of Utah. He played last year on the franchise tag, so 3rd contract, 2nd contract, however you want to look at it. But Dan, give us kind of an overview of what this all means. What's our effective cap space now?
Yeah, so taking a look at where that kind of sets us up for the cap. If you look on the left side, it shows kind of where we stood before this. We've got about $15.6 million in cap remaining, which was, we've got the $205 million of updated 2022 salary cap for the Ravens. So it's a little bit below the kind of the 2022 base salary cap because of incentives from last year that the Ravens earned. So it kind of, if you make the incentive last year, you have to reflect that cost this year. Then you reflect the top 51 salary cap, which is about 82 million. Then you've got $7 million in dead money, mostly from the recent cuts, and then that leaves a total of $189 million in kind of the liabilities or the costs, which gives us $15.6 million in cap. Then we've got 10 rookies to sign, which is about $12 million. You offset those with the 10 people that come off, the bottom 10 that come off of the top 51. So that's $8 million. So only it kind of ended at the end of it this morning, they had about kind of 11.6 when you kind of reflect the rookies coming. Then on the right, we kind of show, what, what it looks like after the signing. So for this one, I kind of took the midpoint between the two scenarios, and it was a $6 million cap hit. We also get to reflect one more person removing. So you reduce the cap by $6 million, but then you also get to gain back about $800,000 from the kind of removing the bottom person on the top 51. So you end up with a cap remaining of about $6.5 million. So there is some money left still, and that's without making any real moves to kind of gain more. So
right, and we'll see kind of what that can look like. And we talked about it in our salary cap preview show from last Friday. One of the most obvious ones being a restructure of Marlon Humphrey. It's just one of they have. Let's jump right to that quick, because this is a number of cap moves the Ravens can make to free up money. So you can see 5 restructures on here that can create significant money. So they may be sitting right now at $6 million effective cap space. All they have to do is kind of hit some of these restructure levers to free up that cap, and then that increases the effective cap. So I guess the big question that I would have is, what do you see is likely to happen, and what's our grand total that we could kind of create here in restructures?
So I definitely think they will restructure Humphrey. I think it's likely that they'll restructure Stanley, since his 2022 cap is already guaranteed. So there's not really an increase to kind of lock in any more of his payment. That one may not be as for sure due to the injury risk. And then the other 3 on the bottom, Zeitler, Andrews, and Boyle, they can definitely do those, but they'll probably wait until they need them. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they wait until they need all of them, before they actually trigger them. There's not much of a big difference between whether they do them or don't do them, as long as they're reflecting that they can do them in their decisions. So, right. That's what, 7, 13 plus another 5. 6, so 19 plus that 6 before. So, about $25 million in cap. You do need maybe 5, 10 for in-service things or in-season things. But that gives you, a good 15 million or so of spending. So, and we saw that, you can get a 14 million APY for 6 million. So it's not just 15 million APY, it's 15 million cap. So it depends what length and structure and all sorts of things like that. But they can probably get two decent big name guys, I would say.
Yeah, and that's kind of and then there's some other moves, like you can see here, like just by cutting Powers and Boykin, who are kind of on the bubble right now, so to speak. That could be your in season. So there's some triggers they can do right now to increase that salary cap space. And there's some that they're going to have moving into the season. The elephant in the room is the Lamar Jackson extension, which could create between 5 and 15 million if it were to get done. Doesn't sound like we're trending in that direction, but it just really does show how much they could create. And then they can also get a little bit creative with the contract structures, like what we learned with Marcus Williams' potential contract. And for those of you just joining us, we have Dan Reese and James Ogden joining us. Hit that like button, hit subscribe if you guys are new here. So that kind of gives us a picture of the salary cap. This is what it just looks like if they just restructure Marlon Humphrey, which I think we all think is a guarantee. So they'd be looking at 13 million in effective cap space. You factor in 5 or 6 they'll take into the season, plus all those other things they can do in a restructure basis to create more cap space. So you can, nicely see that the Ravens are sitting in a pretty good spot with regards to the salary cap. And then, I think you have to be pretty excited about that going into this. We're going to get into it a little bit later, some of the next steps, what they could do from here. But now I got to kick it to my guy, James. He's been sitting there for 20 minutes. He's being patient. We love it. So let's get into the film, because I know you've had a chance to kind of dive into it. I watched 2 games while I was supposed to be working today, praying to God my boss isn't watching right now, because he'll give me the old switch. Before we jump into it, one of the things I want to throw out there really quickly that's really nice about a Marcus Williams signing is he's played in 76 of 81 possible games in his 5-year career. Good health, good durability. He's not coming in with any injury concerns, anything that you need to be worried about. A couple games here and there. I think last year was his lowest games played, with 14 out of the 17. And one thing I wanted to highlight, because it was kind of thrown out there in the timeline, I just wanted to kind of clarify in terms of where he's going to be best used, and we're going to get into that with James more in depth. But I love to look at snap count alignments. For as much crap as people give Pro Football Focus, they are one of the best at charting snap alignments, and I genuinely respect that. They do a great job. So if you guys look at it, in 2021, he had 1,040 snaps, 922 came as a free safety alignment, 21 in the slot, 87 in the box. 2020, 1,005 total snaps, 837 as a free safety, 37 in the slot, 120 in the box. In 2019, 1,049 snaps, 854 at free safety, 42 in the slot, 123 in the box. As we're going to find out here, he's a free safety. And he's really thrived in that kind of center field, 15 to 25 yards off the line of scrimmage role. So, James, let's get into it. What can you tell us about it? What did you see in your film watch?
I mean, the first thing you've got to say is range, right? His range. The first thing you want to study when you study a safety, especially a safety like him that's a true post safety, you want to study his range. Where can he get to? What routes can he get to from what position on the field? And the guy. So he ran, I think, a 4.56 40. So he's got solid speed, but he's not a burner, but he's explosive, and he processes. I have to switch between English and American English. He processes the game at such a high rate that he is able to maximize his range. So his play speed is off the charts because he has solid speed, and then he brings it up with that technique, with the explosion, and with that processing. And so, he can get from the near hash to the sideline with no issues. He can get from the far hash to the numbers with no issues. And this is the kind of thing you want to measure. You want to be looking at what part of the field can he get to from what starting point. And the guy has outstanding range. And then when you add his ball skills onto that, so I think that I saw a thing today that he's one of the least if your stats is your thing, I think he's one of the least targeted defensive backs in the league.
18 targets in 2021. 18.
And then when he is targeted, he by far and away gets his hands on the ball more than any other DB in the league. I think by at least a couple of percentage points above the nearest guy. So he's got ball skills. He may not have a ton of interceptions, but that's he makes plays, and he also makes plays in the red zone on third down. He makes plays when it counts. And you can go back to his Utah tape and find, he had 10 interceptions in his sophomore and junior year. So the guy does have the skills to pick the ball off too. So those are, to me, are his best traits, and it's exciting. It really is.
It's kind of the conversation that we had recently. We, as in, not just you and I, but as a draft community, about Kyle Hamilton when he ran a 4.54 40 or whatever it was. You watch his film, that's not what you see. And so the thing that popped out for me is, it's not just how clean his footwork is, it's just how nuanced it is. Every step has purpose. And that's where, I know you've learned this from your work at the Scouting Academy, but they talk about play speed, combining that athletic ability with your mental processing. And it's why you'll see guys test really well and not play as well, and then vice versa. And so, I say test really well, it's all relative. He's still got wheels on him, but relative to his peers, he's a little bit slower in his speed score, but he processes so well, he moves so well with that processing, that every step has purpose. And that's what, Ed Reed, 4.56, I think is what his 40 was. Did he play like 4.56 player? No, anybody? No, he didn't. So it's one of those things, and that's why I think one thing that the Scouting Academy has done so well is developing things like that. Things like functional strength versus just strength. It does that combining ability of what you're testing, what you're measuring, and what you actually see on film, how the player actually plays. So Marcus Williams may not be a burner, quote unquote burner, but really high level play speed, every step going in the right direction, going with purpose. And I think that's why he's one of those guys that they just don't want to tempt, right? So he's, I think I saw something out there about his raw stats. His PBUs are down. He's only had like 5 interceptions in the last 2 years. Well, I mean, yeah, but that's because no one throws the ball at him, which is a good thing. And that's only going to help out the corners, because if he's erasing the amount of things you can do as a corner, the amount of cheating you can do, that's what Baltimore Ravens corners were blessed with for a decade, with Ed Reed manning the middle of the field.
And also, Cole, the numbers that he's got in terms of getting his hands on the ball are even more impressive when you watch him play, when you consider the way he plays for the Saints, which is he starts 15 yards off the line of scrimmage and he'll very quickly get off to 25, 30 yards away from the ball. Like it's hard to get your hands on the ball a lot when you're that far away from the line of scrimmage. Safeties, the best post safeties, the best center fielders like him, they're like the secret services. Their failures are public and the successes are private. And he has quite a lot of public successes as well with the amount of times he gets his hands on the ball. But he's, you don't see him for large parts of the game if you don't watch the All-22. And then you watch the All-22 and you watch him play basically a chess match with Tom Brady, where Brady is like staring down Mike Evans on a seam route up the middle. And Marcus Williams is determined to stay disciplined and not bite on that seam route, because he knows, because he's seen Brady's eyes, he's periffed the receivers, he understands the route development, and he sees a Chris Godwin wheel route coming open up the sideline, and he knows if he goes to Evans fully, Brady's going to go to Godwin, and Brady hesitates, and it gives the Saints pass rush the time to get home. That's the kind of things that you see when you watch him. I think he's an extremely intelligent defender, and that fits so well with the Ravens.
It really does, and it's going to help those corners a lot, especially a guy like, they're going to have a little bit of, let's call it, fluidity at the slot corner position. You're going to have Brandon Stevens moving around a lot. He's probably one of the Ravens are winners in general, but Brandon Stevens is a huge winner with this signing. I know on one hand, it might be like, well, he just stole his position, but on the other hand, they can use him in so many different ways, where I think he really thrived as a rookie, was, showing that versatility. He doesn't need one position. And that's something that our friend Michael Crawford at A Bukhari on Twitter threw out there in our group chat. And he just said, look at how the safeties were used at Michigan under Mike McDonald. They had Hawkins, Dax Hill, and what's the other guy's name? Number 5. I always call him number 5. I always forget his name. Belton. Can't think of it. But he used heavy 3 safety looks, but Dax Hill played so much as like a slot corner. So you kind of see Brandon Stevens in that role. You had Hawkins in the box. That's kind of like the Chuck Clark role. And then you got Marcus Williams, whoever that guy is. I feel bad for him. Number 5 on Michigan. That's kind of the deep center field role. So I think that's really an interesting dynamic to see the versatile skill sets in those 3 guys. And then you go watch Michigan tape, and you kind of see the way Mike McDonald used 3 safeties. And Dax Hill was basically used as a slot corner, but he has projectable traits as a safety and is probably going to be a safety in the National Football League. And that's very similar to Brandon Stevens. So I think you can kind of see those parallels, and that has to excite you in terms of how they could be used.
Yeah, and the other thing the other couple of things I wanted to talk about with Marcus Williams is 2 things that I always sometimes find a little bit difficult to kind of evaluate, which is mental toughness and physical toughness. And so the first one is one you see from Ravens all the time, is that physical toughness. There was a little bit of talk early in Marcus Williams' career that he was a little bit, he didn't quite have the physicality to come down and play the run. I can tell you that isn't his game anymore. You can see him come down and scythe Leonard Fournette down with a shoulder to the thigh. He tackles through guys. It's great. But then his tackling. So one of the things that I think is really impressive about him, and I'm deep in the college guys at the moment, and occasionally I just come out to watch a few sort of NFL guys, which is a thing that Mike Crawford does. And I think I came out to watch a bit of Marcus Williams a couple of weeks ago, and remembered that I really liked him coming out of Utah. But then I also remembered the Minneapolis Miracle, which is the play he's probably most famous.
Someone sends me that GIF one more time, I'm going to just start flipping chairs.
But I think what's great about that is it shows that's the ultimate mental toughness test. He came back from that. That was in his rookie year, and he came back and became the kind of safety he is, the kind of safety that Drew Brees says, I'm not sure where that. Sometimes the guy's on the field, I'm not sure where he comes from, but he's there and he's got the ball. He turned into that guy after having the worst possible sort of end to his rookie career. I just think that shows real strength of character and a guy you want in the locker room. But it's also it's such an important trait for a safety, for a defensive back, because you're going to get beat, and he just shows that he can take the ultimate beat and still come back from that. I love that.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. And it's, I guess I didn't realize I was all the way back in 2017. Up here in Canada, there's a lot of Bills fans. So they were hitting me because it was Diggs that caught that ball and now Buffalo did, I don't hate the play. The other thing is he got there early because of his instincts and because of his processing. So he got there early. So it kind of reminded me of the Mile High Miracle, because it wasn't, I don't think people understood, were he more adjusting to that ball? I mean, Flacco threw that ball 60 air yards. It was insane. If people are going to go on about it, that's fine. But it was a hell of a play by the offense. I credit them there. Just like I didn't drag Raheem Moore too much on that, unless I was on Broncos Twitter, then I'd do it. But, the other thing that popped out there, I think PFF charged him with 10 missed tackles this year. Tackling issues have never been persistent in his career. I only went through 2 games today. Is there anything you can tell us about his tackling? Any concerns there? What do you got there?
The only thing for me was I thought he's at times underestimated. So the thing that the Scouting Academy will teach you is to try and look for, when you see inconsistencies in play, what is the reason for that? What is the competition he's facing? What happens? And when I saw him miss a tackle, it was usually a bigger guy where he sort of prepared himself to have to make a bigger hit on the guy and kind of underestimated the bigger guy's agility, lateral quickness. So he missed a tackle on Dawson Knox in the Bills game when he set himself too far outside. As a tackler, as a safety, you want to see him take the inside hip, but he set himself a bit too far outside, and Dawson Knox just took what he was giving him and broke inside him. So just that was the only time I saw the tackling was an issue was then, which I think is probably him trying to account for the fact that he has a little bit less play strength. So was trying to get himself into a position to make a tackle on a bigger guy. So that can happen occasionally. But the thing to remember, the stuff that, Jamar Chase streaking down the field against the Ravens, this guy against more athletic wide receivers, he takes great entry angles into to play the run and to play receivers going after yards after the catch. But he also comes from high to low really well. He sets himself very well in the open field. The tackling issues I saw weren't open field tackle issues like the Ravens have had over the course of the last year.
Okay, there it is. So, something to keep an eye on. No player's perfect, but not a persistent problem expected to carry on. I think at the end of the day, you kind of come away feeling we got a pretty elite center field safety, at a very good price. Like we looked at, 7th highest APY in the league. So, that kind of shifts away from the film. So we've kind of looked at, okay, what's the cap situation now? what is Marcus Williams going to bring the Ravens? And so I guess kind of wrap this up. And guys, if you guys are in the comments, you guys have questions, drop them. We'll get to them before we wrap up. But I guess it's kind of the next question is like, where do we go from here? The Ravens have quite a few, I think, more cap money at their disposal with the ability to restructure. So it's like, what's the next fish to fry? So Dan, I'll kick it to you. Like, kind of, what would you like to see in terms of next moves?
Well, you'll be happy to hear. I think they should go O-line, but I wouldn't mind them getting a decent cornerback to support them. But as we've seen, the cornerback market, especially for backups, has been pretty soft. So I think even Averett they could get back relatively cheap. So I would love that. Just sneak that in there and not really impact their ability to sign bigger guys. I think JC Treader. I don't know much about his game, but being the head of the NFLPA, I believe that's a comment about what his peers think of him, and so I think that kind of a player goes a long way. So I think a center and maybe a tackle, and also would love to sneak in Averett if we can.
And a couple people dropped in the comments. It was announced that Eddie Goldman's coming to visit Baltimore on. So I mean that they need a nose tackle. Eddie Goldman's a good one. All comes down to the price, but I think you're getting a pretty good player. Nose tackler from the Chicago Bears. James, what about you? Where would kind of you shift your focus now?
I mean, I'd definitely go offensive line, but I'll give you guys that. I think the other place I'd like to see the Ravens address would be just some like depth vets on the defensive line. I think I'd like to see, like we talked about Eddie Goldman. There's a few other guys out there, Akeem Hicks and obviously Calais as well. I'd like to see a couple of vets on the defensive line if they can get those guys cheap. But you're not. I mean, the problem is Calais Campbell, Akeem Hicks, they're not going to come cheap, so it may preclude you from signing other guys. I just think the number one priority going into the draft, it just has to be offensive line. It's the thing that provides you with the most flexibility going into the draft. It means you don't have to address a need. There obviously are needs on this team, but the glaring need currently is offensive tackle. And I also think the glaring need currently is center. I'm like you, Cole. I don't see Makari as best position at center. I see his best position as the sixth man or playing right tackle. So I'd like to probably see a center at some point.
Yeah, and my man Engraven Vids down in the comments. Good to see you, brother. Nailed it. If they can get a center and a tackle before the draft, you got to feel pretty good going in there. So I think the JC Treader release is kind of a win-win for the Ravens because on one hand, it gives them an option and JC Treader to be a possible signee, but it also could lower that price tag of Bozeman a little bit more. So if it's not JC Treader directly, it's going to be Bradley Bozeman cheaper indirectly because of JC Treader. So, and I mean, tackles just keep getting released. Brian Bologna, whatever you want to call him, from another guy hitting the market. There was a lot of releases of guys that can be swing tackles, right tackles. The guy that I've had my eye on really close is Cornelius Lucas from the Washington Commanders. What's going to happen here is going to be really interesting. I think one of the key is I need a guy that can play right tackle and left tackle. But if they can't, I need them to be able to at least play somewhere else on the line. So that's where, a guy like Morgan Moses, if you kind of go back and look at his tape, he played, I think, 3 games at left tackle. It was 150 snaps, whether that's 2 or 3 games 2 years ago at left tackle. So if you kind of look at him and you see, okay, he can be my starting right tackle, but could also play left tackle if Stanley can't get right by week 1, then, let's rock. Trent Brown gives you that ability. Or you can go with a little bit of a cheaper bench swing tackle guy in Cornelius Lucas, Billy Turner. The problem with those guys is, do you want them starting for long periods of time? Is it going to be a McCarry situation where they kind of get worn down and, McCarry can get you through it all 5 positions through, get you through the rest of the game, probably stack a couple games. I mean, that's one thing about Patrick McCarry. There's no one else on the Ravens roster that I'd bet on more in terms of his ability to go out there and battle his ass off. I mean, he's out there with little alligator T-Rex arms, and he doesn't care. He's a battler. Whatever needs to be done for him to win reps, he'll find a way to do it. And that's just something he's done. It's just when you get into periods where he's starting game after game after game, it gets a little bit tough. And that's going to happen with all these swing tackles. So, with the cap situation where it is, I'm not sure if Trent Brown's going to be in the cards, but that's your kind of ideal situation because he fits perfectly in a gap scheme. Everyone dogged him on the Raiders. I don't think people realized the Raiders ran a zone scheme back then, not a zone tackle. He's 6'8", 380. He's a mammoth. But Baltimore runs gap. He was a left tackle Super Bowl winner in 2018 in a gap-based offense in New England. So that's kind of what I see as the marquee signing. And I think on a 2-year deal, based on what we looked at with their ability to create some more effective cap space through some of the restructures, I think you could get that done. And that may still leave you with a little bit to squeeze in some other moves. If they want to go on the cheaper end, I think you're looking at, that group of swing tackles. A guy like Darrell Williams offers you that right tackle ability and can also compete at left guard, but is he going to be able to play left tackle for you? That's where it kind of gets tough for me. So it's like, and they have the draft. It's about, for me, I want to feel comfort going into the draft that I can go BPA pretty consistently. I don't have to reach for any position. So that's kind of what sums up my feelings. Do you have any thoughts? Have you gotten into any Cornelius Lucas, Billy Turner, any of those? Have you come across them at all, James?
No, not a lot. I know. No, not enough to speak on them.
Yeah, no worries. And I was sitting there watching Cornelius Lucas tape last night. That's where I'm at in the. I forgot that there's a draft even coming. Let's check out some of the comments we have. Was watching highlights, but don't want to be fooled. Is he really like that? Yes, he is. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the highlights. It do be like that. Ravens Punch says, "What's the number you'd be willing to spend to keep Averett?" Dan, kind of explain the Levi Wallace contract and where you think that could put Averett's market.
So Levi Wallace was signed by the Steelers for 2 years, $8 million. PFF had him at ranked 128 in their free agents, the top 200. Averett is not in the top 200 for reference. I think Levi Wallace was projected to make, I don't recall, was it $7 million? Or I sent you over the numbers, but it was well higher than the 2 for $8. So it's a soft market for sure. They got a great deal. So if they're getting Levi Wallace for 2 for $8, 2 years for $8 million, I don't see Averett getting that. If so, this maybe people will see less of Wallace than they did and more of Averett. But PFF has been pretty darn good on ranking free agents and costing their contracts. So, I think the market's going to be pretty soft. The draft is really strong for cornerbacks, so people don't want to pay above the cost of a rookie contract for someone who's going to be comparable.
Right.
For a rookie, and especially when you get the rookie for that price for 4 years. So you'd have to be quite a bit better, or you need the cost pretty close to where the rookies are. So, if I were going into it, I would look somewhere like $2 million APY, maybe 3, and probably like 1 or 2 years. I don't think Averett wants a long deal either. I think he wants to show that he can do it and get a better contract. So I could see something like 1 year, 2.5, something like that.
And I think you'd be so like the number I threw out there before this Levi Wallace contract, and that's one of the things as these deals come out, it's going to kind of shift the market, which is exactly what you're explaining. And so the number I threw out there is like they could probably give him like I was expecting 4 APY, so like a 2-year $8 million deal, cap hits at 3 and 5. I thought that'd be decently team friendly. You're feeling pretty good. He gives you some of that insurance, but if you can get it even cheaper than that, it's only up from there. So I mean. James, kind of from your film watching, what did you think of Averett as a player, and vis-a-vis his contract value?
To me, he's a solid guy that you can only you can't have enough corners, and he's a solid guy. I think the number, and sorry, solid is kind of, in Scout Academy language, is kind of average, and I think he is slightly above that. I think he's slightly above that waterline. I just wonder whether you. It all comes down to the number. It all comes down to the number and where you're going to get him at, and if you can get him, in that Levi Wallace bracket, or a little bit less, I think you'll be happy with that, and you'll probably take that. You've got to think about this from the replacement player perspective and understand like the level of play you're getting above a kind of replacement guy who would probably be below average. So you're kind of willing to pay just a little bit more to keep him. I think it's a really interesting decision for him. Does he take a 1-year deal and take a gamble that the Ravens know him, and Marcus Peters might not come back kind of fully healthy, and maybe he gets a bit of a another go round, and he plays better and plays himself into a better contract in a year's time when there's a less good cornerback class in the next year's draft. I don't know. I think it would be, if we can get him at that kind of price, then that's probably a good deal, and I'd do that.
Yeah, I think familiarity is going to be big for him. So obviously Baltimore being a familiar place, but sneaky team is the Giants, who now have Wink Martindale, who he played under for the last 3 years, or 4 years, whatever it is. So I think that's, I think we're in that region, 2.5 to 3.5, 4 on the higher end. If you can get him in there for that, I think you're sitting pretty good. It also allows you to be a little bit matchup oriented. If you want to get Marlon Humphrey in the slot, and you don't want to put Brandon Stevens out on the boundary because that's not how you see him, it gives you that guy off the bench that can just step in and play outside corner. Would expect them in that scenario to also double dip in the draft. I think 2 corners being drafted is almost a lock. I'd be pretty shocked to see them draft 3 and kind of bring 3 rookies into camp to support those other guys. Brent here has a great question. Where does this leave our backup safeties like Washington, Jefferson, and Stone? Seems like we don't have enough roster space to keep them all. It is interesting. I know Tony Jefferson got tweeted at today, and he said he's got to go into camp and earn his roster spot. So we always love seeing the fire from Tony. I don't think his roster spot's guaranteed by any means, but kind of the way I see it, and I don't want to get married to this idea, but it's stuck in my head from watching David Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson. So I watched so much of Mike McDonald's defense recently. That 3 safety usage, his ability to use 3 safeties with Stevens as kind of the, with Dax Hill as kind of the slot corner, flexible role. You kind of see Stevens, Williams, and Clark as those 3 guys. And then so the backups to those 3 guys would kind of be like Stone being the backup to Williams, Jefferson being the backup to Clark, and Adarius Washington being the backup to Stevens. So, don't want to get too married to that idea. I think that's where you'd kind of look at Darius Washington and Brandon Stevens as DBs versus, true safeties, because they're going to factor into that slot cornerback picture. So it's all going to be how the total DB numbers play out. And I think a guy like Washington being flexible gives him, or not flexible, versatile, kind of gives him that leg up to grab a roster spot as a quote unquote DB versus just a safety or just a slot corner. Do you guys have any opinions on that from what we saw? And obviously a very limited sample, but what we've kind of seen from those guys.
I'm with you, Cole. I think that's exactly the kind of thought process that you would go through for those safeties. The way you've outlined it with the 3. The other thing I feel is that this is a great thing for Geno Stone, because this is the type of guy who Geno Stone was a lot slower than Marcus Williams was in his 40-yard dash, but Geno Stone is the same kind of guy in terms of gets off his spot quickly. Play speed is improved by his processing. So I feel like this is a really good thing for Geno Stone's development, to see Marcus Williams and how he plays the game. And you can tell just from Williams' tape that he is a tape head. He's watching tape all the time, because he can, he's off his spot before quarterbacks have even decided to throw the ball. So he knows what's coming. So I do think this is a really good move for Geno Stone from that perspective.
Agreed. No, that's really well said.
One thing I want to throw out there, Cole, is looking at the last 3 years, there have been right around 10 to 11 DBs on the roster of the 53-man roster. So right now you've got 6 safeties, the 2 cornerbacks for sure. So that's 8. So we've got 3 more spots. Uh, I think we were talking about it with a couple folks on Twitter. Maybe Averett and then two draft picks, and that'd be great. So that would really kind of wrap up the group.
Yeah, they kind of got the practice squad set with the guys that they brought back on futures. But I'm not sure Kayvon Seymour is playing too much into that. The only thing Robert Jackson has going for him is he has the same name as my dad, so I got a soft spot for him.
Do you think there's any chance with Amon Marshall, or do you think he's just never been on the field?
I just that guy's a bigger wild card than James and Stanley. He's kind of the. I'd love his potential coming out, the big body press corner. Would have loved to see him get to actually rep behind Jimmy Smith and actually play. It's just it's like Groundhog Day with that yearly camp. And I feel so bad for the guy. I hope he gets a shot. It's just one of those guys you're not going to plan for him. There's going to be injuries. There's always DB injuries in camp. But bring him in, let him compete. That's why, when people are like, "Oh, just cut him, save the mill," it's like, nah, that's not enough of a savings to not bank on. I mean, you've kept him around this long, you might as well give him a shot to actually get out on the field. This is his last chance, right? He's 2019 draft class. This is pretty much it for him. So I'd love to see him kind of get out there, and I think he'd offer a nice little outside skill set. Would really kind of build that depth. If they do bring back an Anthony Averett and your backups as your boundary corners are Averett and Biggie Marshall, you got 2 very different skill sets that you can deploy in depth roles. So, that's good. James, what do you got on Biggie?
Same. I was really excited too about him coming in. And so it is just a weird kind of, I don't know. You can't count on him. I feel like Westry kind of overtook him in the kind of long corner ranks as well. So it feels like, and there's also a bunch of guys in this draft that are long and will be intriguing to the Ravens. DaCosta said it in the combine press conference. You can get a corner at every point throughout this draft. So I feel like he's probably not long for the Ravens.
I'll never be more upset than when they picked Biggie Marshall over Ugo Amadi, who ended up going to Seattle. I had him banked as that slot corner backup that could also be a punt returner. He ended up in Seattle. That one killed me.
That's not true because Mason above Stone Forsyth was definitely more upsetting to you.
That one, man, I was screaming. Well, hey, if they don't sign Pat Ricard, Ben Mason's probably looking at a future All-Pro selection as a fullback. So again, if you guys have any questions, drop them in below. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you guys are new.
I got a question for you guys.
Yeah.
I'll sneak it in here while we're waiting for more. I assume that Marcus Williams plays way too far off the line to previously have the green dot, but is that fair? And Chuck Clark will still have it, and he'll be mostly kind of closer to the line of scrimmage and kind of can game manage there.
I would think so, Dan. I think he plays a long way off, and it's not like it's something that was just. I mean, it is part of the way the Saints play defense, but it is also something saw him do at Utah. It's kind of his thing. There is a thing for safeties that if you're going to start. If you are a great processor and you're explosive, you probably actually want a longer, you actually want to be further off the line of scrimmage because your strength is your break on the ball. So it's okay, it's okay to be further off. So he will, even though it's not necessarily as much the Ravens style, he will do that just because that's the way he plays, and he'll be asked to do other stuff as well. But I think you're right. I think Chuck Clark probably keeps the green dot just because he will stay on the field as well in nickel packages. So I think that's probably going to be right. But one thing to say on Marcus Williams, he is a leader. He will, you see him demonstratively pointing and directing traffic and directing guys around. He takes responsibility. You can see numerous times there's blown coverages by the Saints and he's panicking, and then he sprints out and covers a guy covers a receiver on the edge man to man because nobody was on him. So the guy is a leader on the back end, and I think that he will bring that to it. He's a quieter guy. I think there's a thing about him. I don't want to say this because people will think he's a John Harbaugh Boy Scout, but he doesn't like cursing, and his nickname at Utah was Duck Boy because he used to say "What the duck." Instead of the other thing. And apparently they had a blitz, and I might mess this up, but I think they had a blitz that was called Ass Kill Zero, and it changed while he was there to Butt Kill Zero. So he's a quieter guy, but I do think he's quite a leader, and you can see it from the Saints coming out on Twitter, and you really congratulated him. He looks like he's a good guy for the locker room.
Well, there now the people that were being negative about a signing that got quieted are now going to be able to latch on to that we signed a John Harbaugh choir boy. Not enough drama in Marcus Williams for them. I think I think that's a great point. I definitely think Clark will keep it, just kind of continuity factors in there too. But Ravens punch. He's hashtag team clean, keep it clean. We love that. We just got another question coming. Any chance we enter the draft with all 10 picks, or is a trade on the horizon? It's a good question. I mean, that's kind of the wild card is they do have those picks at their disposal. As they add players, you kind of like Dan went over it in pretty good detail when we did our preview. Now they've filled the safety void. They just don't have a whole lot of needs if they add a couple of these guys. So a trade is one of those avenues. Lael Collins was kind of out there as a possibility. Very weird situation. It's just been really hard for me to kind of wrap my head around outside of a post June 1st, which Dan filled me in. That's a thing. They can release him with a post June 1st designation and save that cap space. But no one seems to want to trade him for a very, we'll call it friendly kind of contract structure for the team that trades for him. I think he'd check a lot of boxes for them, but no one seems to be biting. So it kind of makes me wonder what's going on there. Is there something we don't know about, off the field issues? Or was that, the drug test thing where he was suspended for failure to basically produce a drug test? So, he's one of those guys though, where you could trade for him and he's plug and play. We just saw a guy like Shaq Mason get traded to the Bucs. I'm assuming because Tom Brady still has dirt on Robert Kraft and just kind of is able to pull these trades off whenever he wants. For a 5th round pick, that trade made no sense to me. I don't know about you guys. Brandon Thorne put it out there. He's a top 5 right guard. Very, very confusing. Him beside Ryan Jensen, that's a lot of meanness on their interior. But I'm all for a trade. I think there's definitely some guys out there that would be interesting. It's always who's in the business right now of trading away, good players on good contracts. That's what you have to wonder. But there's always the option, like we saw with Marcus Peters, like we saw with Calais Campbell, where they trade and do an extension, that sort of thing. There's a little bit of buzz out there around James Bradbury, cornerback from Carolina. That's a lot of money to put into your secondary. Dan and I talked about this offline, so that would shock me because that's a lot of money going into your secondary because you're taking on a 13 mil cap hit on 1 year if you trade for Bradbury. I'm assuming they'd extend him, even though they could theoretically fit him under after some cap maneuvering with the restructures. But, again, you'd be paying all 3 corners, both safeties, 5 guys getting paid. I think they'll kind of go cheaper with, Stevens playing a big role and then a couple of rookies, maybe a cheap deal to Anthony Avert or a light corner. What do you guys think? Is there any trade options you can kind of think of off the top of your head? I know Collins is kind of the easy one. Anyone else that kind of stands out? Or
I was going to ask Dan, does the kind of the fact that I think one of the reasons what that might preclude them from trading is the inheriting the contract structure that actually when they're signing free agents, they're able to do what they've done with Marcus Williams and get the cap number down low. Obviously, you could restructure guys and extend guys when you get them in, but it feels like it's a little bit less flexibility with the trades. Or am I wrong with that?
Well, I would agree for trades that are for kind of 2nd and 3rd contracts. You would want those to be near the end so that you can restructure or basically redo the contract. What you the ones you want to target are the ones that are on their third or like basically their third year of their rookie contract. So really cheap. And you can say, look, you can restart the rookie contract sort of clock. And that's kind of where I could see them doing or finding something is sneaking in a young, third to fourth year player that fills the need, maybe a D line or something like that doesn't drastically impact their cap. So that'd be where I would look. And I don't know any names off the top of my head that would fit.
Darren Payne's kind of one of those guys that stands out from Washington. He's kind of buried in the fray. They may look to get an asset for him. I'm assuming it probably costs like I want to say a third. I'm not good with this stuff. Maybe a third, maybe a second, because he is pretty good. But he's just basically been hidden there, but he's been very productive in a per capita basis. But that's kind of an interior. He's a name that intrigues me because I do think this interior defensive line class is shallow. It's kind of like if you look at the big board and after Fedarian Mathis, it's like got a bunch of nose stuffers, couple guys like Haskell Garrett, and there's one other kid, can't think of his name. Couple guys that you could work on developing, but in terms of impact pass rushers on as an interior defensive lineman, it falls off really quick. So I do think those guys could get overdrafted because teams don't want to wait until their pick comes around. So I think Darren Payne could be one of those really interesting guys. It's going to cost you a premium position. You're going to have to turn around and give him a contract, which could actually maybe lower his compensation. And there's also Washington may just not be in the business of trading him. We're not sure about that. But he's a name that kind of stands out there that I think would be, a possibility. And I think he's on year 3 or year 4 of his rookie deal. So it kind of fits with what you're saying. You're not getting that extended cheap years, but you're getting a cheap year, and then you'd have to worry about paying him moving forward. So he's that kind of guy I think that could fit in. This is an interesting question. I'm kind of curious to get thinking of Jordan Davis, to get James' opinion, because my opinion on Jordan Davis changed a little bit with this signing, and I'll get into why. I'll let you go first. Jordan Davis at number 14, were you into that as an option before this signing, and does this signing change your mind at all?
I've been into Jordan Davis as an option at 14 since I studied his tape, which was pretty much, I think, back in January when I first studied his tape. The guy's, I don't like the kind of the stuff about 2-down run stuffer, and that's all he is. Like, of course, he's not going to be on the field for every snap. No defensive lineman is for the Ravens. There is a rotation. So I don't worry too much about that. And like I've said before, I think some of the issues you found with his snap count was more when teams like Tennessee and Alabama kept him on the field for the length of drives. They ran hurry up, and at the end of drives, he got a bit gassed. And if you're 340 pounds, you're going to get a bit gassed at the end of
I get gassed at 180 pounds.
I get gassed at a bit more than 180 pounds. So I don't really buy that stuff. I think that the thing for me is he's a special run defender. He's also got real potential as a pass rusher, that he has to be blocked by 2 guys. If you block him with 1 guy, it's over. The play is over. So, there's real advantages to having a guy who just has to be blocked by 2 guys. The caveat I would say is that as I've gone through my evaluations, I have found 14 players that I would take above Jordan Davis. And so that is like, it has to be relative. And I do think that's what it will come down to, is that he's just not quite at the point where I would take him when you're thinking about whole value and the full evaluations of the different players in this class.
I'm almost tempted to take him because if he gets on the Chargers, it's going to be terrifying. And that's the impact he can have, right? He's going to eat that interior. He's going to be taking up space there, but they're also trying to adjust to Mack and Bosa on the edges. And, the biggest thing for me on Jordan Davis is I genuinely don't think he's just a one tech. There's nothing really about his traits and how I project him that tells me he's not athletic enough to, if I set him in the B gap and tell him to just eat that gap, if it's 3rd and long, they're going to have to slide their center or bring their tackle over and leave a tight end on my end. So his ability to, because when you're a one tech, you can use that center and then you can get that center off that block after kind of sustaining it. But if you have to slide your center over a full gap, you've left two guys on the backside against two guys. It just creates that bigger separation of, creating pass rush matchups for the rest of your defensive line. So that's really what I kind of see with him. I don't see him as just a one tech. He's going to do a ton of one tech. Don't get me wrong. Especially if he ended up on Baltimore, it's kind of like you sit him in the one tech, you got Mads in the three tech. You feel pretty good about what those two can do against the run. I think they're kind of an upgrade. But I kind of land with you after going through seeing, especially some of these pass rushers, that kind of, I call them the little bit of a group of three with Walker, Jermaine Johnson, and David Ajabo. The true ice cream analogy where three guys that I couldn't, it's kind of like Ojabo's your speed rusher, Walker's your power rusher, and Jermaine Johnson's your balanced. If you guys like Madden and you're collecting your player archetype, it's kind of that. It's literally that idea. They're that kind of compare and contrast to one another. Dan, what do you kind of think about Jordan Davis as a first round pick?
Yeah, I think there are concerns about that position of whether it's a position of value. I do think the way it can benefit the other positions, I think that makes it more valuable, like the ability to take those two blocks on. But I do think that he would be more of a, based off of all your discussions, he'd be more of an option in a trade back scenario. And there are a couple of guys that would be really good fits for the Ravens, but maybe reaches at 14. So I think he might be one of those guys.
And if they do a trade back, and I'm sure we're going to get a question on that, so I'll just get my opinion out there. If they do a trade back, I'm okay with it. I don't think they need 11 draft picks, but it's just going to give you more ammo to do a trade up later, and I'm a big fan of that. I've been a big fan of the trade up from 45. I think they could really hunt down some big game. A guy that slips out of the first round happens every single year. Even trading up for a Daniel Falale, you add him into this mix, you get that kind of, especially with so much uncertainty at tackle. So if your guys are healthy and he's developing, that's only going to help you, just like we saw with Jordan Mailata in Philly, who's, very comparable to him as a guy newer to the sport of football that's a crazy sized Australian with a rugby background and just wants to hurt people. So that really intrigues me. And then, I think we'll kind of wrap up after this because we're getting a little bit off the topic, but I'll put this out there because I always want to ask James when I have him, but day 2-3 edge rushers are good fits for the Ravens. James, anyone you've kind of put a marker on as a good fit in that kind of, well, let's say 70 to 140 range of the draft?
So I'm not in day 3 yet. For anybody who's noticed, I'm putting out a Ravens focused draft guide this year, and so I'm going I've not got to the later guys because I'm going into so much depth with the 120 guys that are going to be in the guide. So I'll give you a couple of names, and they are more day 2. I think one of these guys is actually might end up being a first round pick, so maybe I'm cheating a little bit. But I saw the beatdown guys, talked about him recently as well. Actually, is Arnold Kennedy from Penn State. A really great fit for the Ravens. I think he's a guy who will play best if you have him in a 2 gap scheme where he can stay patient. He's another Penn State edge rusher like Owe, where that he's been coached to be patient and to not get off the ball at the same rate that he can because of his explosion. But I do think he's a guy that you can get the field early because of the kind of the way he plays against the run. He's just not quite the same level of athletic as Owe, but is a guy that I think could be a really good fit. And then the other guy that I'm really intrigued by, and I think I put my report out about him recently, is Alex Wright out of UAB. He's just a really toolsy guy. Just hasn't quite yet worked out how to take advantage of his length. You know, he's 6'6", I think, and doesn't have the massive arms. Actually, it was a surprise, his measurement at the combine, but he hasn't quite learned to take advantage of his height yet. So I think he would be an intriguing guy. He's got the raw tools, just hasn't got any kind of rush plan yet as a pass rusher, but he's got, you know, the tools that you'd look for, and he's a physical, tough run defender too. So I'd really like him as well as a kind of day two guy that you think about.
Almost like the poor man's Trayvon Walker.
A little bit.
That's kind of where I haven't gotten deep into right, but you know, based on what I have seen, that's two guys that I'd throw out there. Amari Barno from Virginia Tech is interesting to me in that Sam role, kind of bringing in the Tybo type skill set. Maybe redundant. It really depends on what you say in Dalen Hayes. I actually think Dalen Hayes is a better rusher than he was getting credit for. I don't see him as just a Sam. I think he can, you know, get his hand in the dirt and rush. So if they want to get kind of that athletic chess piece, stand up, you know, Sam linebacker, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call him, Barno from Virginia Tech could be that kind of guy. And then in the spirit of poor man's later round guy, I'd throw Dominique Robinson out there as a poor man's David Ojabo, as a really raw, newer to the position, not new to football the way Ojabo is, but he's newer to the position. He switched from wide receiver last year, which is one of the more interesting switches I think I've ever seen, you know, going from a wide receiver to an edge rusher. But he came in at a good size. He tested really well. He has good bursts. He's just learning to play the position. So you're going to get him later, but you can kind of – and wagon to guys that Dane Brugler hitches his wagon to. He's one of Dane Brugler's guys, so that's always going to get a little bit of a bump. And yeah, someone just asked about Boy Mafe. I don't know about anyone else. I'm lower on Boy Mafe than others. You know, I'll let James talk after here to kind of give his opinion. I watched him in a couple games. His game against Ohio State actually kind of made me like their left tackle. What's his name? Petit Frere actually made me like Petit Frere more. I thought he had a really hard time getting much going against him. Petit Frere has guard feet, which was really weird. I thought he would actually really struggle against the speed rusher. My opinion is I actually think he's getting a little overrated. You know, James, what do you kind of think about Mafe?
Yeah, I think he's, you know, he's all potential. I think the reason Petit Frere had a better time, was okay with him, was because he doesn't I just don't think he's got a plan yet, Mafe. So I think that's why Petit Frere was okay with him. And that is what you saw with Mafe. But I think he's, you know, he's twitchy, he's bendy. Like, I think he's all potential. I think he's a disciplined edge setter, but I don't think he squeezes his gap yet. So I do think, you know, he gets into you first, but there's just not that, he doesn't really leverage his gap. So I think he needs to add some core strength. I think there's lots of development there. But I think the thing that was most intriguing to me was the thing the Ravens look for a lot now is growth on tape. And I definitely saw that out of him. And then you definitely saw that at the Senior Bowl when he got some pro coaching. You saw even more, like you saw him take another step, and he looked really impressive at the Senior Bowl. So I really, really like Mafe, and I think it's a potential, like he is all potential. The thing I would like to see out of him is him do some linebacker drills, because I actually wonder whether he could convert into a kind of hybrid kind of Sam type. Like, he's never going to be Tyus Bowser, but I think you could get him dropping a little bit more than he did at Minnesota, which was pretty rare.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm actually going to go out here and I'm going to cut us off, because if we get going draft talk here, James is going to fall asleep on stream. You know, we're playing it with the advantage of the time change right now, but it's still late for him. So we're going to cut it off here. I just want to take a second and thank both of you for coming on. You know, I know everybody in the comments really appreciates, you know, getting your knowledge, your expertise. You know, this channel was all about kind of bringing together different disciplines. We get the cap guru, we get the film guru, we put it together to show you what Marcus Williams can do for you and what we could look at going forward. So that's all I have for you guys today. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Peace out.